On this video, I want to discuss a little bit the concept of reincarnation and the Jewish attitude towards it. I want to be as objective as possible. This is not a very straightforward topic, and a lot of times even those who believed in reincarnation tried to hide it and didn't really want to discuss it, or only used some kinds of hints regarding this concept. And it became very controversial because today, certainly among Orthodox Jews who believe in the Torah and in the Talmud, that's what defines us as Orthodox, believing in both written Torah and accepted oral law, which is the Talmud and the Shulchan Aruch. So a lot of Orthodox Jews believe in reincarnation, and there are some who don't. And I want to discuss some of this and try to be as objective as possible for a person who, it's nature of people to not be objective, so it's certainly not going to be fully objective, but at least I'm going to say a few words and try to cover all sides. So I'm not going to discuss the possible so-called scientific evidence whether reincarnation does or does not exist. That does not concern me right now. It's going to be specifically a discussion on a Jewish view on reincarnation, classical Jewish view and what people believe today. But whether reincarnation actually does exist or not, that could be, in theory at least, researched scientifically. And there are some who claim that there is some scientific evidence for reincarnation, the others who reject it. So you could say there is a dispute about that too. But at least those who try to promote a kind of semi-scientific approach to this type of stuff, they try to find people who claim to remember, sometimes under hypnosis, but really that is not too convincing. Usually the much more convincing proof is for people, usually at a young age this happens, that claim to remember something that happened in their previous lives and verify whether this in fact did happen to the person claimed, and whether this type of information a person could get in some other way. For example, there was a video circulating in a Druze community in Israel. There are certain groups of Arabs who are separate. Their religion is a type of Islam in a larger sense, but it's considered different from most of the mainstream. Again, there's no mainstream Muslim religions, because there are a lot of different versions of Islam. Shiites, there are Sunnis, there are all kinds of divisions within them, but at least in the general sense, I would say that Druze can be considered Muslim because they do believe in Quran, they do consider Muhammad a prophet, so in the general sense they are no less Muslim than, let's say, different denominations of Christians are all considered generally Christian, whether they're Greek Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant, and all kinds of groups of Protestants. So anyway, the Druze happen to believe in reincarnation. That's not the standard approach in Islam, from what I understand. I'm not, of course, an expert in Islam, or not claiming to be. But there was a video circulating about some boy that grew up in a Druze village in Israel. And of course, in places where people do believe in reincarnation, they do not dismiss when children still remember something from their previous lives, or claim to remember something about their previous lives. So this particular boy happens to be speaking British English. And there's nobody in their village who speaks any kind of English, certainly not British English. And it's not clear that he would be able to pick that type of stuff up from some, maybe media, from some device. But he speaks a very nice, beautiful British English with British accent and with quite complex words. And it's a kid. It's a kid who grew up in a village where nobody speaks like that. And so that's the type of stuff. Again, I'm not claiming it's a proof. I'm claiming that that's the type of stuff that could mean a proof for certain people. So there is some research done, even on the level of professors of universities. There was somebody named Jan Stevenson who wrote a lot on this topic, and tried to find people also who have even something physical in their bodies that may be a reflection of something that happened to them in their previous lives, like children who are born with certain signs on the certain birthmarks, I guess, on the skin that may show a kind of violent death that happened to them in a different life, in the same place. For instance, that the throat was cut, there is some mark, things like that. So, like I said, I'm not claiming there is a proof. I'm not claiming there is no proof. I'm not going into the scientific part at all. I just wanted to mention quickly, before we get to the Jewish view, that there are disputes among among people who are not Jewish and who are in general researching the topic, and there are at least claims that such a thing can be researched scientifically. But my point is only to discuss theoretically what was the Jewish attitude towards reincarnation. By the way, reincarnation is a very popular topic in recent years. It would seem to come from the East, but as we'll see in a moment, there were at least a number of Jewish traditions that believed in reincarnation, and in somewhat classical sources, depending on how one treats the Zohar, as we'll discuss in a moment. But generally, a lot of people associate reincarnation with the beliefs of Eastern religions, but there are a lot of people all over the world who believe in reincarnation, all kinds of people. And it's very logical kind of thing to believe, right? That why not? Why not imagine that a soul could come to this world more than once? I mean, there's nothing that contradicts it in terms of the various things that people believed in all kinds of religions. There's nothing that seems too far-fetched that such a thing could happen. So at any rate, what's the Jewish view on reincarnation? Well, like everything else, especially such a topic, there's a lot of controversy over it. So I must say that there's no one place in the written Torah that clearly implies reincarnation. But our weekly reading in particular, and that's why I wanted to discuss it now, the weekly reading of Vayeshev, where Yehuda, by default, this is even before the giving of the Torah, later it will become a law of Yibum, but by default, Yehuda assumes that one of his sons is going to marry the widow, Tamar, who is the widow of the brother that died. Dies, and Onan marries Tamar. And then when Tamar when Onan dies, Yehuda apparently is waiting. Maybe he was tricking Tamar. There's a dispute exactly, or maybe he was just waiting to give more time for Shelah to grow up. But the assumption is that Shelah was supposed to marry Tamar. And then in the end, it happens that Yehuda has relations with Tamar without realizing it. And by the way, she's praised for it. She did it. It was a type of Yibum before giving of the Torah. Not the brother, but the father is doing. Usually Yibum is done by the brother, meaning there's a law that the Torah would later say in Parshat Kiteitzeh at the end, that the person who dies without children, if he has a brother who is alive, he does the Yibum. Or does Chalitza if Yibum is not done. Today, by Ashkenazic Jews, Yibum is never done. We always do Chalitza. It's a special procedure to release the widow, kind of. But it used to be that, and today still in Sephardic communities, in Eastern Jewish communities, what's called Sephardim and Edot HaMizrach, Eastern communities, they still do Yibum today. So the idea is that the brother has to do Yibum, if there is a live brother. But before giving of Torah, apparently other relatives could do that too. And Yehuda, without realizing, does a kind of Yibum, and he has relations with Tamar without him realizing it's Tamar, mistaking her for some prostitute. But in the end, she gets pregnant and gives birth to two children who, in a sense, consider the substitute for and Onan. So again, the Torah doesn't say openly that it has anything to do with Gilgul here, but it seems to be implying that the Torah would keep saying it all the time about this and Onan that died, and instead Yehuda having Peretz and Zerach. It's going to appear in the Torah whenever there's genealogies, including the book of Chronicles, what's called Divrei Hayamim. It will keep, when it mentions the genealogies of Yehuda, it will keep mentioning and Onan. Why mention them if they died? But it seems to imply that their souls continued on with being born now through Tamar. Now the logic of Yibum, according to Mikubalim, is exactly that. What's Yibum? That the closest two people to the one who died without children, and that is his former wife, his widow, and his brother. Those two can create a possibility for the soul to come back exactly the way it was. With all the levels of the soul, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, the same person is born again. We see a hint to it in the book of Ruth also. Same story. Ruth, her husband died in the lands of Moab, and later when she marries it wasn't a brother, it was a cousin of the deceased, the cousin of Machlon, whose name was Boaz, a judge of Israel, and she gives birth to a child whose name is Oved, and her mother-in-law, Naomi, basically treats it as if it's her child. How could that be? Again, the logic is that it's her child, Machlon, who was the former husband of Ruth, right, that now came back through Ruth, through his own wife. He's now the child of his former wife. The same soul came back through his cousin and his former wife, who is now his mother. That's why Naomi, his previous mother in the previous life, treats him as if it's her child. People said, Ben nalad Naomi, a child is born to Naomi. So this is another hint. Again, it's not a proof, it's just a hint. One of the greatest hints to Gilgul is considered Sefer Eov. The Kabbalists, the Jewish mystics, say that Eov, of course, is the book of Job in English. Eov was a book about a man who suffered a lot, even though he was completely righteous. And there are a lot of explanations of that book, and some say that this never really happened. It's just a mashal, it's a kind of proverb to understand that Hashem sometimes sends suffering to people, and not necessarily because they're wicked or they're sinful. But at least in terms of the various friends of Eov, each of his friends tried to explain what is happening to Eov. But the last one that spoke last, Elihu ben Barkela Buzi, he seems to imply a concept of a person who is dead and then comes back again. And therefore, Eov, according to him, is suffering not because of his sins. In this life, he didn't have any sins. He was totally righteous. But because of some sins he committed in the previous gilgul, in the previous reincarnation. So again, this doesn't say, the book doesn't say it openly, but that's how Mikubalim understand the words of Elihu ben Barukiel Abuzi. And really, there is no other simple way to understand his words, because otherwise, what is he adding? He seems to be saying the same things as the other friends of Eov already said. What is he adding? And Eov also doesn't answer him back. Eov also seems to be quiet in the end, right? If his idea is that sometimes a person is suffering and he's sick, and then if there's even one angel who finds some merit and asks Hashem for this person to be given back to life after he's sick, what does it have to do with Eov? Eov never did any sins, and he didn't just have one merit out of 1,000. Right? Milis echad mini eler, it says, if he has even one angel out of 1,000 who finds some good in him. But according to the Kabbalists, the book of Eov here is talking about the idea that Elihu ben Barkeli Abuzi was saying, is that if a person dies, not that he's sick, but he dies, and even if he has one out of 1,000 angels who find something good in him, so there is a way to rectify this person. A tikkun. This person can get a tikkun, some kind of rectification in a new life. Can start all over. That's what Elihu ben Barkeli Abuzi was saying. So like I said, in the written Torah there's no clear concept of Gilgul, but there are a number of places which may be considered a hint to Gilgul. So in terms of the later times, the Talmud also at most hints to Gilgul somewhere in certain places, maybe. A very rationalist Acharon, a person who mostly wrote commentaries to Rambam, or Sameach, the author of Or Sameach, Rabbi Meir Simcha Midvinsk, from Dvinsk is a city in Latvia, it's now called Daugavpils. So there were two very important rabbis in the generations before World War II there, and one of them was the author of Or Sameach. So he also says that a lot of things in the Talmud seem to hint to the idea of Gilgul, even though that's not what Rambam believed. So it's not an unusual thing for rabbis who are even not necessarily mystics to see at least hints in the Talmud that might hint to the Gilgul. But like I said, the Talmud nowhere mentions it openly. The books of Kabbalah, though, are full of this idea, of course, in the Zohar and the Kitvei Arizal and others. So depending on when Zohar was written and how authentic it is, the idea of Gilgul may or may not be a very important and backbone idea of Judaism or not. So there are some groups in Judaism, in particular, there is a group of Yemenite Jews. Some Yemenite Jews are big mystics, by the way, and they had among them very great Mikubalim, Kabbalists. But there are other groups among Yemenite Jews who are big rationalists. And one of them, Dordea, they are like people who want to actually follow only rationalist side of Judaism. And they don't believe in Zohar or any of the mystical teachings there. So they're not the only ones, of course. A lot of modern Orthodox Jews and some Haredi Jews, a lot of people of all kinds may or may not believe in Gilgul. I would say that most Haredi Jews today believe in Gilgul. In fact, in the standard Art Scroll Siddur, it's probably the most common Siddur, the most common prayer book that we use. In the prayer before going to sleep, we say that we forgive anybody who did anything bad to us. And among other things, it's mentioned whether he or she did it bigilgul zeh or bigilgul acher. This gilgul, any other gilgul. So basically, the prayer assumes, this particular prayer assumes that we believe in gilgul, right? We say that whether they did something bad to us in this life or in a different life, we want to forgive that person. So this is just an example where a standard siddur takes it for granted there is an idea of gilgul. But like I said, there were, in fact, disputes about it. There are some great sages who openly denied Gilgul. In particular, it's known that Rav Sadia Gaon, a great sage who was born in Egypt and later lived in Babylonia, he denies the idea of Gilgul. Although there are some who try to interpret his words differently, but it seems clear that he was denying it. A lot of other sages didn't openly address the topic, but it would seem that they did not believe necessarily in Gilgul. Even as late a sage as Rashash, Rabbi Shmuel Strashun, there's a different Rashash who was a Mikubal, actually, a Yemenite Kabbalist, Rashash, Rabbi Shalom Sharabi. But Rashash, we usually use abbreviations for names of sages, so Rashash, that's Rabbi Shmuel Strashun, he lived just recently in Vilna, less than 200 years ago, from what I understand. So he actually writes in a commentary to the Talmud that it seems from the Talmud he wants to prove that a person is born only once. That there is some proof from the Talmud, even according to him. Again, he's not necessarily saying that this is a full proof, but he thinks that at least one of the places in Talmud in Bava Metzia seems to imply not like the idea of those who believe in Gilgul. So at least this idea was never settled. I'm trying to say that both in the early times, in times of Rishonim, in the times of Achronim now, there are sages who completely accept the authenticity of Zohar and who do think that there are hints to Gilgul in the written Torah, in the Bible, and there are sages who reject it. So both opinions exist. Both opinions are, in my opinion, legitimate. There are some sages who claim that you have to believe in the Zohar to be a good Jew. There's only one legitimate opinion. I don't think like that. I'm trying to say, and I'm trying to be as objective as possible, that there are both traditions in Judaism, some who reject Gilgul and some who support Gilgul. Both have their point. In my opinion, Gilgul is well-founded in Judaism, but the idea was well hidden, and that's why, as opposed to certain Eastern religions where the idea is discussed by everybody believes in this type of stuff, in Judaism it was more like a hidden idea. And that's why Ramban, among other sages, he was a great mystic, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, he lived in Spain and later in the land of Israel. So he hints to Gilgul in a number of places, including his commentary to Eov, to the very place I already mentioned. But he never really says it openly. So I asked myself a question, why? Why is it that the sages did not want to reveal? There are certain things that the sages didn't like to reveal to general public. And this is one of them. So those who believed in Gilgul, and maybe they were the majority, it's again very hard to say who were the majority, but at least a lot of sages may have believed in Gilgul. Some of them seem to be hinting to Gilgul very clearly. Ramban for sure. Nobody argues that Ramban believed in Gilgul. So why didn't he say it openly? Why is he saying that you're not allowed to discuss this kind of stuff? Well, in general, the Chachma of Kabbalah was hidden, as the Gra writes, for instance, the Sifra de Tzniuta, the main book of Kabbalah, is from the word Tzniut, is kind of modesty, that you have to hide things. In this wisdom, everything is with hints. The Talmud discusses that certain mystical elements of Maaseh Merkavah, the beginning of Prophet Yecheskel, were only taught to a person with hints, and one person at a time. You couldn't have a whole lecture to like a bunch of students. One person you could teach with hints, and if he understands, he understands. So the question is, in particular, the concept of Gilgul, the reincarnation. Why was it so hidden? Look, in India, everybody discusses it, and nobody tries to hide that this is what they believe in. So why the people who believed in Gilgul among our sages wanted to hide this idea? So it came to me this interesting, I'm not sure I'm right, but I will share it with you, an interesting idea. And it's as follows. If a person is really sure about the Gilgul, he may not invest enough in his life right now. He may actually give up in a lot of cases. You'll basically say to himself, I'll have plenty of chances. Maybe I'll do better this next time. It's specifically when a person thinks that this is his last chance, he'll do much better. He'll try his best to live a productive life, to keep the Torah and mitzvot. Once a person believes he'll have many chances, he's going to try much less. So for simple people, it's not such a great idea. I'll illustrate it by a different concept that is somewhat related. And it's based on a mashal, on a kind of proverb that the author of Chafetz Chaim, a sage who lived about 100 years ago, very great and accepted sage in Israel, among the Jewish people. By the word in Israel, I meant here among the Jewish people. He did not live in Israel. Anyway, so the Chafetz Chaim writes about a person who, let's say, did not keep his business properly, meaning he's cheated people, he stole from people, and he's trying to explain to him what it will look like when he dies, and he has to come back to this world to return back what he stole. And he makes the following mashal. He gives the following kind of proverb, analogy. that there was a person who went to a faraway island and he lived there for many, many years. And he's coming back with all his profits that he made and with everything. He wants to see his family. And he's standing on the ship, and he looks, as the ship is approaching his country, he sees already his family is waiting to greet him. And then all of a sudden they don't let him down from the ship. They tell him, oh, by the way, you know, you actually didn't pay for something in that faraway island. We just got a telegram that you owe money and you have to go all the way back. And he's like, no, I'll pay right now. Give me a chance. No, absolutely not. There's no such law. If you didn't pay, you have to go back and pay in the country where you deceived, where you stole. You have to go back and pay. So the idea that Chofetz Chaim is saying is that people might think, do all kinds of things in this world, and then think that when they die, it will kind of work out somehow, and then in the end they'll have to come back to the new life and start all over. And it's not that easy. You have to come back all the way to this world again to fix something you messed up. So what's the point of all this? It's so that people don't take the idea of gilgul too easily. In the times of Chofetz Chaim, a lot of people already believed in gilgul, the ideas that were spread based on the Zohar and later Hasidic teachings. So gilgul became a well-known thing. But the result may be that a lot of people are going to think, big deal. In the worst case scenario, I'll come back to this world. So Chofetz Chaim is trying to tell them that no, you will come back to this world, but it's not such an easy thing. You have to start all over, everything, all your life, start all over and do everything all over. It's as if a person already was hoping to reunite with his family, with the souls from your cluster of souls, I guess. Maybe that's what this is hinting to. You're already waiting, you want to leave the ship, and they don't let you, and they tell you to come back, all the way back. So the idea is that if a person believes in the gilgul, the side effect of this is that maybe a person will just, every time it's hard, they'll just give up and do whatever they want in this world and hope, okay, next time I'll do better. Maybe I'll be luckier next time. But we're here to try our best in the attempt we're given. So we should live our lives as if there is no second chance, that this is the last chance. Only later, if it happens already that the person messed up, then Hashem is merciful and he tries to fix every soul. And I'm going to leave you with the last possible hint of gilgul for today, and that is in the book of Shmuel, when a wise woman comes to David when he lost his son. His son Amnon was killed, and she's trying to tell him to forgive the other son, Avshalom, who killed him. And she says, among other things, that we're like water poured, and Hashem will make sure, Shelo yidach mimeno nidach. A person will not be fully pushed away from Hashem, meaning almost everybody gets a tikkun in the end. So to console a person whose, for instance, child died relatively young, then the idea, if she's hinting to gilgul, then that idea is a good idea to help a person go through the loss and understand that his son is going to have another tikkun, he'll be able to come back. But when a person is alive, the person should live as if this is the last chance. This is the last possibility to do everything we're supposed to do in this world and not hope, okay, I'll do better next time. Okay, if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.